I'm Gemma, 34 female. I live in a quiet suburban city that's just close enough to the downtown core to be convenient but far enough away to feel peaceful. For the last decade, my life has been a disciplined cycle of work, saving, and investing, all focused on a single, towering goal. That goal was to buy a house, not just any house, but a place with a garden, a spare room for my hobbies, and a sense of permanence I'd always craved. This is the story of how achieving my biggest dream showed me the ugliest truth about my own family, and how being ignored forced me to finally build a life they couldn't be a part of. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. The journey to owning my home wasn't glamorous. It was built on packed lunches instead of takeout, on spreadsheets that tracked every dollar, and on saying no to countless nights out with friends. As a senior financial analyst, my job is to find the story behind the numbers, to see the patterns and predict the outcomes. I applied that same ruthless logic to my own finances. While my friends were taking lavish vacations or leasing new cars, I was funneling every spare cent into a high-yield savings account labeled Future. My colleagues would sometimes joke about my frugality, not understanding that I wasn't depriving myself. I was investing in a future they couldn't see yet. My family, however, saw my discipline differently. My mother, Brenda, a lifelong homemaker, often sighed dramatically when I'd turn down a spontaneous shopping trip. "Gemma, darling, you have to live a little," she'd say, as if saving for a multi-$100,000 asset was the equivalent of locking myself in a tower. My father, Peter, a regional sales manager who was often on the road, would just chuckle and say, "That's my practical Gemma," before turning the conversation to my younger brother, Archie. Archie was and always has been the sun in our family's solar system. At 21, he was still a university student, coasting through a business degree that Dad was paying for, living in a cushy apartment Mom co-signed for, and driving a car that was a gift for his 19th birthday. Archie breathed entitlement. He wasn't a bad person in an evil sense, but he was profoundly spoiled, wrapped in a protective layer of parental enabling that had shielded him from every consequence he'd ever faced. His greatest struggle to date was passing his driving test. The day I finally closed on my house was surreal. It was a charming two-story colonial with blue shutters and a sprawling oak tree in the front yard. It needed some cosmetic updates, but it was mine. The keys felt heavy and significant in my palm. I walked through the empty rooms, the echo of my footsteps the first sound to fill the space. I imagined the life I would build here: dinner parties with friends, quiet evenings reading by the fireplace, the simple joy of painting a wall whatever color I wanted. This house wasn't just wood and nails. It was a monument to my independence, to a decade of silent, relentless work. My first call was to my parents. Mom answered, her voice bright and cheerful. "Gemma, how are you, sweetie?" I couldn't contain my excitement. "Mom, I did it. I closed on the house. I have the keys in my hand right now." There was a brief pause. "Oh, well, that's wonderful, dear. We're so proud of you." Her tone was pleasant but lacked the explosive joy I had hoped for. It sounded more like I'd told her I'd found a good deal on groceries. "You must be thrilled." "I am," I said, my own excitement dimming slightly. I wanted to plan a small housewarming party. A celebration. I was thinking next Saturday, just a casual get-together, family only, to see the new place. "Oh, next Saturday," she repeated, a note of hesitation in her voice. Well, we have something on next Saturday, Gemma. It's a big day for Archie." I was confused. "A big day? What is it? A final exam?" "No, silly," she laughed, a little too loudly. "He's finally passed his driving test. On his 5th try, can you believe it? The little champion never gave up. We're going to take him out for a huge celebration dinner at the Grand Steakhouse to celebrate his persistence." I stood in my empty living room, the smell of fresh paint in the air, feeling a cold wave of disbelief wash over me. A celebration dinner. For a 21-year-old man finally managing to do something most 16-year-olds accomplish on their first or second try. And it was taking precedence over me buying a house. "You're kidding, right?" I asked, my voice flat. "Of course not," Brenda said, completely oblivious to my shock. "It's been such a source of stress for him, you know? The examiner was so mean to him the last few times. He really deserves this. We can come see your house on their time. It's not going anywhere, is it?" The casual cruelty of that last sentence hung in the air. "So, let me get this straight," I said slowly, forcing myself to remain calm. "You're choosing to go to a celebratory dinner for Archie passing his driver's test over a housewarming for the first home anyone in this family has bought in a generation." "Don't be so dramatic, Gemma," she chided. "It's not a competition, it's just bad timing. We need to be there for your brother. This is a huge milestone for his confidence." I wanted to scream. A milestone? My down payment alone was more money than Archie had ever seen in his life, let alone earned. This house was a real milestone, a life-altering achievement. His was a testament to the fact that if you fail enough times, someone will eventually just pass you to get you out of their office. I called my dad next, hoping for a more rational perspective. He was a numbers guy, a sales manager. He understood targets, goals, and achievements. He answered from his car, the sound of the highway humming in the background. I told him the news, my voice still trembling with a mixture of pride and frustration. "That's my girl," he boomed. "Knew you had it in you, a house, huh? That's a big deal." Relief flooded through me. "Thanks, Dad, it really is. I was hoping you guys could come see it next Saturday for a small celebration." "Ah," his voice changed. "Your mother mentioned that. Listen, Gem, we're already committed to this thing for Archie. It's important to your mom that we make a big fuss. You know how he gets when he feels overlooked." Overlooked, the irony was so thick I could barely breathe. Archie hadn't been overlooked a single day in his life. He was the most intensely looked-at person I knew. "Dad, he's a grown man who passed a basic life skill test," I argued, my voice rising. "I just leveraged a decade of my life into a major financial asset. Do you honestly not see the difference in scale here?" He sighed, a sound I knew all too well. It was his "I'm not getting involved" sigh. "Look, it's just one night. We'll swing by your place on Sunday for a bit. Just don't make a big deal out of it with your mother, okay? Let Archie have his moment." The call ended, and I was left in the profound silence of my new, beautiful, empty house. They weren't coming. The two people who were supposed to be my biggest cheerleaders were prioritizing a participation trophy for my brother over the single greatest accomplishment of my life. It was more than just a scheduling conflict. It was a statement of value. And in the family ledger, my lifetime of careful planning and hard work was worth less than Archie's fifth attempt at a three-point turn. That evening, the joy of homeownership was tainted by a bitter, familiar feeling. In the eyes of my family, I was the supporting character in the story of my brother's life. The week leading up to my housewarming was a study in forced cheerfulness. I invited a few close friends and my Aunt Margaret, my mom's younger sister, and the sole voice of reason in our family. My friends were ecstatic for me, their excitement a soothing balm on the wound my parents' dismissal had left. They promised to bring wine, food, and enough positive energy to fill every room. Aunt Margaret called me the day after I spoke with my parents. Her voice was laced with a familiar mix of sympathy and exasperation. "I heard about the scheduling conflict," she said, the sarcasm practically dripping from the phone. "Celebrating Archie's driver's license, are we? I'm surprised they didn't rent out a stadium." I let out a weak laugh. "Apparently, it's a huge boost for his confidence, Maggie." "Oh, please," she scoffed. "The only thing that boy's confidence needs is a reality check. Brenda and Peter have wrapped him in so much cotton he'll be surprised when the world expects him to tie his own shoes. I, for one, would rather celebrate a real achievement. What time should I be there on Saturday? I'm bringing my famous 7-layer dip." Her unwavering support was a lifeline. At least one person in the family saw the situation for what it was, utterly ridiculous. Despite the support from my friends and aunt, a small, foolish part of me held out hope all week. Maybe my parents would realize how hurtful they were being. Maybe they'd call and say, "We've been ridiculous. Of course, we'll be there. We can take Archie out any other night." Every time my phone buzzed with a message from Mom, my heart would leap, only to sink when I saw it was just a picture of Archie practicing parallel parking in his newly legal car, captioned with "Look at our confident boy." On Saturday, the day of the party, I woke up with a knot in my stomach. I spent the morning unpacking boxes, arranging furniture, and trying to manufacture a festive mood. I set up a table with snacks and drinks, put on a playlist of upbeat music, and lit a few scented candles. The house looked beautiful, warm, and inviting. It looked like a home waiting for a family to celebrate in it. Around 2 p.m., my phone rang. It was Mom. "Hi, sweetie, just calling to wish you a happy housewarming day," she chirped. "I hope you have a lovely time with your friends. We're just getting ready to head out for Archie's dinner now. He's wearing the new blazer we bought him. He looks so handsome and grown up." She then proceeded to send me a photo of Archie posing awkwardly in a navy blazer, a goofy, self-satisfied grin on his face. He looked less like a grown-up and more like a teenager heading to his first school dance. "That's nice, Mom," I said, my voice tight. "So you're definitely not stopping by at all?" "Oh no, we can't," she said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "The reservation is at 5, and it's all the way across town, and your father wants to make a whole evening of it. You understand?" I didn't understand at all, but arguing was pointless. "Okay, Mom, have fun." We'll try to pop over tomorrow afternoon if we're not too tired. Love you," she hung up. Not if Archie isn't too tired. If they weren't too tired. Tired from what? Cutting his steak for him. The party started at 4 p.m. My friends arrived, their arms full of gifts and their faces full of genuine happiness for me. Aunt Margaret showed up shortly after, placing her legendary dip on the counter and giving me a long, comforting hug. "They're lost, Gemma," she whispered in my ear. "This place is incredible. You did this." For the next few hours, I almost forgot. We drank wine, toured the house, and they showered me with compliments about the hardwood floors and the big backyard. We laughed and shared stories. It was everything a housewarming should be. But every time the doorbell rang, a traitorous part of my brain hoped it would be them, having changed their minds. It never was. Around 6 p.m., while my friend Chloe was telling a hilarious story about her own moving disaster, my phone buzzed. It was a group text from my dad, sent to me, my mom, and my aunt. It was a picture of the four of them, Mom, Dad, Archie, and Archie's latest girlfriend, seated at a lavish table at the Grand Steakhouse. Archie was holding up a dessert menu like a trophy. Dad's caption read, "Celebrating our champion, so proud of this kid for sticking with it, persistence pays off." My friend saw the look on my face. "What is it?" Chloe asked, her smile fading. I showed her the phone. Her eyes widened, and her expression turned to one of pure indignation. "Are you kidding me? They're hashtagging this, as if he just cured a disease." Aunt Margaret took the phone from my hand, her lips tightening into a thin line as she read the message. "Oh, for heaven's sake," she muttered, typing a brisk reply. I saw it a moment later in the group chat. "Looks lovely. Gemma's new house is beautiful, by the way. You're missing a wonderful party celebrating an actual accomplishment." My mother's reply was almost instantaneous. "Maggie, don't be like that. We can do both. Gemma understands." Aunt Margaret looked at me and raised an eyebrow. "Do you?" she asked pointedly. And in that moment, something inside me snapped. I didn't understand. I didn't accept it. I was tired of being the understanding, the responsible, low-maintenance daughter who never asked for anything and was therefore given nothing. They weren't just missing a party. They were actively choosing to celebrate mediocrity over excellence. They were telling me, in the clearest way possible, that my success was secondary to my brother's trivial, long-overdue rite of passage. The rest of the party was a blur. I smiled, I laughed, I thanked my friends for coming, but my mind was elsewhere. The empty chairs at my new dining table seemed to mock me. The space I had imagined my father standing in, giving a proud toast, remained vacant. The corner of the kitchen where my mother should have been, telling me where I should put my pots and pans, was quiet. After the last guest left, I stood alone in my perfect living room, surrounded by wrapping paper and half-empty wine glasses. The house was finally mine, but the joy was gone, replaced by a profound and hollow sense of loneliness. My family hadn't just skipped a party. They had left a gaping hole in the very foundation of what I thought my life was built on. They had chosen to celebrate my brother's 5th attempt over my first home, and in doing so, they had shown me exactly where I stood. And it wasn't in the winner's circle with them. The day after the party, a fragile, exhausted quiet settled over the house. I woke up with a headache, the ghost of cheap wine and the heavy weight of disappointment sitting in my gut. As I cleaned up the remnants of the celebration, collecting empty bottles, washing glasses, and packing away leftovers, I felt a grim clarity beginning to form. This wasn't just about one missed party. It was the culmination of a lifetime of BTLE and not-so-subtle dismissals. It was a pattern, and as a financial analyst, I was trained to recognize patterns. This time, however, the data points weren't numbers on a spreadsheet. They were memories. My phone buzzed around noon. It was Mom. "We're thinking of heading your way in about an hour. Are you free?" The text was breezy, as if nothing was amiss. As if their presence was a gift they were bestowing upon me at their convenience. I typed back a simple, yes. I wasn't going to make it easy for them. They arrived in my father's pristine sedan, Archie lounging in the back seat, scrolling on his phone. He didn't even get out of the car at first. My parents walked up the path, my mother carrying a small, potted orchid, a classic, low-effort housewarming gift. "Here you are, sweetie," she said, handing it to me. "For the new place. It's lovely from the outside." My father clapped me on the shoulder. "Well, let's see it then. Let's see what all that saving was for." I gave them the tour. I walked them through the living room with its high ceilings, the kitchen I was so proud of with its new countertops, and the sunny spare bedroom I planned to turn into a home office and art studio. Their reactions were lukewarm at best. "Oh, this is nice," Mom said, running a finger over a windowsill. "It'll be a lot to keep clean, though." "Good bones," Dad commented, knocking on a wall. "You'll have to watch out for property taxes in this neighborhood. They can sneak up on you." Every compliment was backhanded, tinged with a warning or a criticism. It was as if they couldn't allow me to have a pure, unadulterated moment of success. They moved through my home not as proud parents, but as skeptical inspectors looking for flaws. Archie finally sauntered in, earbuds still in. He glanced around the living room. "Wow, it's big," he said, his tone conveying a complete lack of interest. "You have Wi-Fi yet?" That was it. That was his only question. No congratulations. "No, this is amazing, Gemma." Just a self-serving inquiry about internet access. "Yes, Archie, I have Wi-Fi," I said, my voice dripping with an iciness I didn't bother to conceal. The 5 of us stood awkwardly in the kitchen. The silence was thick with everything that had been unsaid. Finally, my mom, ever the master of avoiding conflict, clapped her hands together. "Well, this was a lovely little tour," she announced. "But we can't stay long. Archie needs to get some driving practice in with his father before we head home." Of course, everything still revolved around Archie and his newfound skill. He was 21 years old and needed supervised driving practice after passing his test. The absurdity was staggering. "Practice?" I asked. "I thought he passed. I thought he was a champion of persistence." My father shot me a warning look. "Don't start, Gemma. He's still new to it. He needs to build his confidence on the highways." "And what about my confidence?" I shot back, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. "What about celebrating something that took a decade of work and sacrifice? You spent last night at a $200 a plate steakhouse for him, and you bring me a $10 orchid and stay for 15 minutes. Do you have any idea how that feels?" My mother's face crumpled into her signature look of wounded martyrdom. "Oh, Gemma, why do you always have to make things so difficult? Why can't you just be happy for your brother? He's had a tough time. A tough time? My mind reeled. What tough time? The time his application for a summer internship was rejected, and Dad called a contact to get him in anyway. The time he failed a university course, and Mom and Dad hired a private tutor to drag him to a passing grade on the makeup exam. Archie's life wasn't tough. It was a frictionless slide, paved with his parents' money and effort. He has never had a tough day in his life, I said, my voice low and shaking with anger. You've made sure of that. You've curated his entire existence to ensure he never faces a single real-world consequence. That's enough, my father's voice boomed, his face turning red. We are your parents. We do what we think is best. Your brother needs more support. You've always been the independent one, the capable one. We don't have to worry about you. And there it was, the core of the issue laid bare on my new kitchen floor. They didn't worry about me. My competence was my curse. Because I could handle things myself, I was expected to. My successes were treated as foregone conclusions, unworthy of fanfare, while Archie's most basic steps into adulthood were treated like Olympic victories. My independence wasn't a source of pride for them. It was a convenient excuse to focus all their energy, money, and attention on him. I thought back over the years. My university graduation, a small family lunch because Dad couldn't get the time off for the actual ceremony, which we later found out was because he was taking Archie on a tour of prospective colleges a state away. My first big promotion, which was acknowledged with a brief phone call before Mom launched into a 20-minute saga about Archie's troubles with his roommate. The time I was hospitalized for a nasty bout of pneumonia, and they visited once for 30 minutes because Archie had a soccer tournament that weekend. Every major event in my life had been downplayed, overshadowed, or outright ignored in favor of some manufactured crisis or minor achievement for Archie. The housewarming party wasn't an isolated incident. It was the boldest, most glaring entry in a long ledger of neglect. They saw my quiet competence not as a strength to be celebrated, but as a pass to ignore me. I was the family's fixed asset, reliable and self-sustaining, while Archie was the volatile stock that required constant management and investment. You're right, I said finally, the anger draining out of me, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. You don't have to worry about me. You've made that very clear. I walked them to the door. There were no hugs, no warm goodbyes. They shuffled out, my mother looking hurt, my father looking angry, and Archie looking utterly indifferent, already back to his phone. As they drove away, leaving me alone with the wilting orchid on my counter, I knew that something had irrevocably broken. The pattern wasn't just dismissal anymore. It was a conscious choice. And if I was going to be treated like I wasn't a priority, then I would have to stop treating them like they were one. The tour of my house was over, and so was the tour of my life that I would be giving them from now on. In the days following that disastrous 15-minute visit, a switch flipped inside me. The hurt and anger didn't disappear, but they crystallized into something else, a cold, analytical curiosity. My family's dynamic was an emotional problem, but their enabling of Archie was, at its core, a financial one. And finance was my language. I decided to apply my professional skills to my personal life. I was going to conduct an audit of my family. My hypothesis was simple. My parents' emotional favoritism was directly tied to a massive, undisclosed financial investment in my brother. I wasn't doing this to be greedy or to demand my fair share. I was doing it to understand the true scale of the disparity. I needed to see the data, to quantify the years of dismissal I had felt. I needed to know if I was just being overly sensitive or if the numbers would tell the same story my heart was telling me. The investigation began with a quiet conversation with my aunt. Over coffee one afternoon, I laid out my feelings, not as a whiny complaint, but as a statement of fact. Maggie, I need to know, am I crazy, or is the favoritism as blatant as I think it is? Margaret stirred her latte, her expression grim. Gemma, you're the sanest person in this family. It's been this way since Archie was born. He sneezed, and Brenda would declare it a sign of genius. You'd win a statewide math competition, and she'd say, "Oh, that's nice, but make sure you're not intimidating the boys." Her validation was a relief, but I needed more than anecdotes. I needed specifics. I knew that my father, despite being a sales manager, was surprisingly old-fashioned and a bit disorganized with his personal finances. He still kept paper records for many things, filed away in the home office I knew he rarely used. My mother, on the other hand, handled all the day-to-day bills online. This gave me two potential avenues of inquiry. The opportunity came unexpectedly. My mother called, her voice strained. My grandmother, her mom, had had a fall and was in the hospital a few towns over. It wasn't life-threatening, but she needed care. My parents were going to stay in a hotel near the hospital for a few days to manage things. "Could you be a dear and just stop by the house every day to pick up the mail and check on things?" Brenda asked. It was the perfect opening. "Of course, Mom, don't worry about a thing." That evening, I let myself into my childhood home. It was quiet and strange to be there alone. I collected the mail from the front porch as requested, but my real destination was my father's office. The room was cluttered, filled with sales awards from the 90s and stacks of paperwork. I found what I was looking for in a large, metal filing cabinet, folders labeled taxes, bank statements, and Archie University. My hands trembled slightly as I pulled out the Archie folder. It was thick. I sat down at the dusty desk and began to read. It was worse than I had ever imagined. There were receipts for a top-of-the-line laptop, semesterly payments for the most expensive meal plan, and monthly transfers to his personal account. NT labeled living expenses, an amount that was more than my first full-time salary. I found the co-signed lease agreement for his off-campus apartment, which cost nearly double what my first place had. The rent wasn't just co-signed. A bank statement showed direct transfers from my parents' joint account to the property management company. They were paying for it entirely. Then I found the car documents. The car hadn't just been a gift. They had paid for it in cash, a brand new SUV. Tucked inside the folder was a thick stack of receipts from a body shop. 4 of them. Over the last 2 years, Archie had been in 4 separate fender benders, each one clearly his fault based on the repair invoices. My parents had paid for all of it out of pocket, likely to keep it off their insurance and prevent their premiums from skyrocketing. This also explained why it took him 5 tries to pass his driving test. He was a genuinely terrible driver, but they kept paying to fix his mistakes, so he never had to face the financial consequences of his carelessness. The deeper I dug, the more I found. Credit card statements for a card in Archie's name, with my father as the primary account holder. Thousands of dollars spent on clothes, video games, concert tickets, and weekend trips with his girlfriend. All paid off in full every month by my dad. I moved on to the bank statements. My parents had a joint savings account that I knew they'd had for years. It was supposed to be their retirement nest egg, but the balance was significantly lower than it should have been. I saw a massive withdrawal from 2 years ago. The memo line read, "Archie Investment Opportunity." I vaguely remembered this. Archie had a brilliant idea to invest in some crypto scheme with his friends. It had obviously gone bust. They had given him tens of thousands of dollars of their retirement money for a glorified gamble. I felt sick. This wasn't just support. This was a colossal, ongoing bailout. They weren't just helping him, they were funding a lifestyle for him that was completely unsustainable, a lifestyle he believed he was entitled to without having to work for it. I thought about my own university experience. I had worked 2 part-time jobs. I took out student loans, which I had just finished paying off last year, a milestone I celebrated alone with a bottle of sparkling wine in my cramped apartment. When my first car broke down, I spent weeks taking the bus while I saved up for the repairs. I never once thought to ask them for money, because I was taught, or so I thought, the value of self-sufficiency. It was clear now, they hadn't taught me self-sufficiency. They had simply expected it of me. The lessons of hard work, discipline, and financial responsibility were for me only. For Archie, the only lesson was that the bank of Mom and Dad was always open, and there were no withdrawal limits. I carefully put every paper back where I found it, my mind racing. I took photos of the most damning documents with my phone, the apartment lease, the car repair bills, the credit card statements. This wasn't about blackmail. It was about evidence. I was an analyst, and I needed my data to be indisputable. When I left the house that night, the potted orchid they had given me was sitting on my passenger seat, destined for the compost bin. They hadn't just given Archie a head start in life, they had been carrying him the entire race, while I had been told to run it with weights on my ankles. They hadn't just ignored my success, they had actively subsidized his failure. And the cost wasn't just financial. The real cost was my relationship with them, which I now realized was a liability I could no longer afford to carry. The threads I had uncovered were more than just financial. They were the very fabric of my family's dysfunction, and I was ready to pull on them until the whole thing unraveled. Armed with the cold, hard facts from my investigation, I spent the next 2 weeks formulating a plan. This wasn't going to be an emotional outburst or a tearful confrontation. That's what they would expect, and that's what they knew how to handle, by dismissing my feelings as drama or jealousy. No, this was going to be a corporate-style intervention. A strategic overhaul of the family's finances and emotional dynamics, presented with the same dispassionate clarity I used when advising a client on a failing portfolio. The portfolio in this case was my brother, and the chief investors, my parents, were about to receive a sobering quarterly review. My plan had 3 phases. Phase 1, information consolidation. Phase 2, the presentation. Phase 3, the ultimatum. For Phase 1, I locked myself in my new home office, the one they had barely glanced at. I created a detailed PowerPoint presentation. It sounds clinical, and it was meant to be. I compiled the evidence I had gathered, scans of the credit card statements, the apartment lease, the car repair invoices, and e-bank transfers. I created charts and graphs. One pie chart showed the distribution of parental financial support between their 2 children over the last 5 years. My slice was a tiny, almost invisible sliver representing birthday and holiday gifts. Archie's slice was a massive, blood-red wedge that took up over 99% of the chart. I created a timeline that mapped Archie's major crises against their corresponding financial bailouts. Failed class, here's the $5,000 for a private tutor. Wreck the car, here's the $8,000 for repairs, no questions asked. Bad crypto investment, here's $30,000 from your retirement fund, son. Juxtaposed against that, I created a timeline of my own life. My scholarships, my part-time jobs, my promotions, the painstaking process of saving for my down payment. The contrast was stark and undeniable. I wasn't presenting feelings, I was presenting indisputable facts. The final slides of the presentation were titled Projected Outcomes. Using my professional skills, I ran a financial projection based on their current spending rate on Archie. I calculated the depletion of their retirement savings and projected that, at this pace, they would be unable to retire comfortably. In fact, they would likely run out of money in their late 70s, potentially becoming financially dependent themselves. Then, I projected Archie's future. A man in his 30s with no concept of budgeting, no real-world work ethic, and an expectation of being bylaid out of every mistake. I wasn't just showing them what they had done, I was showing them the catastrophic trajectory they were on. Phase 2, the presentation, required the right setting. It couldn't be at their house, where they held all the power. It had to be on my turf, my new home. I called a family meeting under the guise of wanting to discuss future family plans. I told them it was important that we were all on the same page about a few things. My tone was serious and professional, which was so out of character that it piqued their curiosity. I also specifically requested that Archie be there. It concerns him directly, I said, leaving no room for argument. I also invited Aunt Margaret, telling her beforehand, I need a witness. They arrived the following Sunday afternoon. I had set up my living room like a boardroom. The TV was connected to my laptop, displaying the title slide, A Financial Review and Forward-Looking Strategy for the Family. My dad chuckled nervously. What is this, Gemma? One of your work presentations? In a way, I said calmly, motioning for them to sit on the sofa. Please, just hear me out. I've put a lot of work into this. Archie slumped into an armchair, already looking bored. My mom looked vaguely anxious. Aunt Margaret sat slightly apart, a silent, supportive observer. I began. I went through the slides one by one, my voice even and steady. I presented the numbers, the dates, the amounts. I explained each financial bailout without emotion. When I put up the slide with the pie chart, a stunned silence fell over the room. My mother's hand went to her mouth. My father's face, which had started with a look of amused condescension, slowly hardened into a stony mask. Archie actually sat up, looking at the screen with a flicker of interest, perhaps seeing the sheer volume of money spent on him for the first time. When I got to the car repair receipts, I paused. 4 accidents in 2 years, paid for in cash, I stated. This isn't just about money, this is about accountability. By hiding these incidents, you've taught him that his actions have no consequences. You're not just spoiling him, you're making him a danger to himself and others. My mother started to cry softly. That's not fair, she whispered. We were just trying to help him. Helping him would have been letting him deal with the insurance claim, I countered, not unkindly. Helping him would have been making him pay for the damages. That's what a normal, responsible adult has to do. I clicked to the final slides, the projections of their depleted retirement and Archie's bleak future as a dependent adult. This isn't sustainable, I said, looking directly at my father. You're a sales manager, you understand forecasting. Look at this forecast. You are sacrificing your own future security for his temporary comfort. And you, I said, turning to Archie, are letting them. You are a 21-year-old man, and you are actively bankrupting your parents. Archie's face flushed with anger. That's not true. I'm going to pay them back. How? I asked, my voice sharp. With what money? You have no job, no savings, and the degree you're barely passing is being paid for by them. You don't even pay for your own car insurance. This led to phase 3, the ultimatum. I stood up, signaling the end of the presentation. This is not a request, I said, my voice ringing with a newfound authority. This is what is going to happen now. The financial support ends. Today, you will give Archie 1 month's living expenses as a final transition payment. You will cancel the credit card. You will take his name off your car insurance and make him get his own policy. He will start paying for his own rent, or he will move out of that apartment. He will get a part-time job to fund his own lifestyle. This is not a punishment. This is what should have happened 5 years ago. I then turned to my parents. And for me, I'm taking a step back. I need space from this dynamic. I will not be attending family functions that are centered around celebrating Archie's mediocrity. I will not be the understanding daughter anymore. Our relationship, from this point forward, will be based on mutual respect and acknowledgement of reality. If that's not possible, then we won't have a relationship. The room was silent, the air thick with shock. I had taken control of the narrative in a way they had never seen before. I wasn't the quiet, responsible daughter anymore. I was a force to be reckoned with, armed with spreadsheets and the undeniable truth. I had closed the bank of mom and dad, and in doing so, I had finally opened the door to my own life. The immediate aftermath of my presentation was explosive. It was as if I had dropped a bomb in the middle of my perfectly decorated living room. Archie was the first to detonate. "You can't do this," he yelled, jumping up from his chair. His face was red and blotchy, a mask of pure fury and disbelief. "This is my life, you have no right to interfere." "I'm not interfering with your life, Archie," I replied, my voice still unnervingly calm. "I'm preventing my parents from ruining theirs to continue funding yours. There's a difference." "This is because of the stupid housewarming party, isn't it?" he sneered. "You're just jealous. You've always been jealous of me." That was the line. The accusation was so predictable, so childish, that it almost made me laugh. Jealous of what? His inability to pass a simple test, his complete dependence on others. Before I could respond, Aunt Margaret spoke up for the first time, her voice cutting through the tension like a scalpel. Jealous of what, Archie? Her work ethic, her financial independence, the fact that she bought this entire house herself while you can't even afford to pay for your own car repairs. Sit down and listen, for once in your life. Archie looked at her, stunned into silence. He had clearly expected her to stay out of it. My mother, predictably, rushed to his defense, her tears now flowing freely. Margaret, that's enough. Gemma, this is cruel. You've humiliated your brother. He's sensitive. You've ambushed us. This is not an ambush, Mom. This is an intervention, I stated firmly. And it's not just about Archie. It's about you and Dad. Look at the numbers. You are putting yourselves on a path to financial ruin. Do you want to be in your 80s asking me for money because you spent your entire retirement fund on Archie's failed business ideas and fender benders? The question hit my father like a physical blow. He visibly flinched. He was a proud man, and the idea of being dependent on anyone, let alone the daughter he'd consistently overlooked, was clearly abhorrent to him. He looked at the television screen, where the projection of their dwindling savings was still displayed. He looked at his son, who was now pacing the room like a caged animal. And then he looked at me, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of something other than anger or dismissal in his eyes. It might have been respect, or maybe it was just fear. "She's right, Brenda," he said, his voice low and gravelly. The words seemed to cost him a great deal. My mother stared at him, her mouth agape. "Peter, you can't be serious. This is Gemma's jealousy talking." "No," he said, shaking his head. "Look at the data. It's all there. I knew we were spending a lot, but I never added it all up like this." He turned his gaze to Archie. "The credit card. Bills, son, the car, the investment. We thought we were helping you get on your feet." "You are helping me," Archie insisted, his voice cracking with desperation. "I need that support. University is stressful." "I worked 2 jobs during university, Archie," I said quietly. "It can be done." The confrontation raged on for another hour. There were tears, accusations, and desperate pleas. Archie tried every tactic in his playbook. He played the victim. He accused me of trying to tear the family apart. He tried to guilt our parents, reminding them of promises they'd made. My mother supported his every move, offering emotional counterarguments to my logical ones. But my father remained quiet, his eyes fixed on the financial projections on the screen. The numbers had done what years of emotional appeals never could. They had broken through his denial. Finally, he stood up. "The discussion is over," he announced, his voice carrying the finality of a judge's gavel. "Gemma is right. Things have to change. Archie, the financial support will be phased out just as she outlined. We'll give you the 1 month's transition. After that, you're on your own. You need to get a job. We'll help you with a resume, but that's it." Brenda let out a horrified gasp. "Peter, no." "Yes," he said, his decision made. "We're not helping him by doing this. We're crippling him, and we're crippling ourselves." He looked at me, his expression a complex mixture of resentment and acknowledgement. "Thank you for the presentation, Gemma. It was illuminating." Archie stormed out of the house, slamming the front door so hard that a picture frame on the wall rattled. My mother, sobbing, ran out after him. "Archie, wait, we'll figure something out," she called after him into the empty street. My dad stood there for a moment, looking tired and suddenly much older. He nodded once at me, a silent, complicated gesture, and then followed them out. I was left in the living room with Aunt Margaret. The silence that filled the space was heavy, but it was the silence of resolution, not tension. "Well," she said, letting out a long breath, "that was even more dramatic than I expected. Are you okay?" I sank onto the sofa, feeling the adrenaline drain out of me, leaving me exhausted but strangely light. "I think so," I said. "I feel free." "You should," she said, coming over to sit beside me. "You did something incredibly difficult today. You told the truth in a family that runs on polite fictions. It's not going to be easy for a while. They'll probably resent you." "I know," I said, "but they were already resenting my success. At least now they'll be resenting me for something real, for saving them from themselves." Aunt Margaret put her arm around my shoulders. "Your father, I think you got through to him. The numbers. He couldn't argue with the numbers. Brenda will take longer. Her entire identity for the last 20 years has been wrapped up in being Archie's manager. She won't know what to do with herself. We sat there for a while, the damning PowerPoint still glowing on the television screen. The intervention was over. The family as I knew it was over. But in its place, I had laid the groundwork for something new, something based on reality, accountability, and the harsh, clean light of the truth. It was a painful, brutal confrontation, but it was also a necessary demolition. I had torn down the old, rotten structure. Now it was time to see what, if anything, could be built in its place. The weeks following the intervention were a landscape of radio silence. My parents didn't call. Archie, unsurprisingly, had blocked my number. The family group chat fell dormant. It was as if a chasm had opened up, and we were all standing on opposite sides, staring at each other across an unbridgeable distance. At first, the silence was unsettling. It was the longest I had ever gone without speaking to my mother. But as the days turned into a month, the quiet began to feel less like a punishment and more like peace. My home, which had been the stage for so much drama, slowly transformed into a sanctuary. Without the constant, low-level stress of my family's dynamics, I found myself breathing more easily. I poured my energy into the house, painting the walls in warm, calming colors, planting a garden in the backyard, and turning the spare room into the art studio I'd always dreamed of. I filled the rooms not with expensive furniture, but with life, with friends, laughter, and the quiet satisfaction of my own company. Aunt Margaret became my primary source of family news. She reported that things at my parents' house were tense. Brenda was treating my father with frosty disapproval, acting as if he had betrayed her and Archie. Archie, true to form, had tried to manipulate them back into supporting him. He'd called them with sob stories about how he couldn't afford groceries and how the stress was affecting his studies. For the first 2 weeks, Brenda had secretly lent him money, but my father, sticking to his guns, found out and put a stop to it. He put a block on their joint account that flagged any transfers to Archie. It was a small, digital boundary, but it was a monumental shift. According to Margaret, Archie had been forced to get a job. He was working part-time as a barista at a campus coffee shop. The first paycheck, which was a fraction of his former allowance, was apparently a brutal shock to his system. He complained constantly, but for the first time in his life, his complaints fell on deaf ears. He was learning, in the most jarring way possible, the basic equation of life that I had mastered years ago: effort equals reward. About 2 months after the intervention, my father called me. His voice was hesitant. "Gemma, I was wondering if I could come see the house again. Alone." I agreed cautiously. He arrived the next Saturday, not with a cheap orchid, but with a toolbox. "Figured you might have some things that need doing," he said gruffly, avoiding eye contact. A new house always does. For the next 3 hours, he helped me hang shelves, fix a leaky faucet, and assemble a complicated bookshelf. We worked in a comfortable silence, the unspoken tension between us slowly dissolving with each turn of a wrench and bang of a hammer. When we were finished, we sat in the backyard with glasses of lemonade. "I looked at our retirement accounts again," he said, staring out at the garden I had planted. "You were right. It was worse than your projection showed. I hadn't factored in inflation." I just nodded, letting him speak. "We failed him," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "We thought we were being good parents, but we were just weak, and we were unfair to you. We took your strength for granted, and that wasn't right. I'm sorry." It was the first apology I had ever received from him, and it was genuine. It wasn't a magic fix, but it was a start. It was a crack of light in a door that had been sealed shut for years. My relationship with my mother took much longer to thaw. She eventually started calling again, her conversations stilted and focused on trivialities. She never acknowledged the intervention directly, but she also never mentioned Archie's struggles. It was her way of silently conceding that I had been right. Our relationship is different now. It's more distant, but it's also more honest. The pretense is gone. She knows she can no longer use emotional blackmail to get her way with me. As for Archie, I hear he's still working at the coffee shop. He had to move into a smaller apartment with 2 roommates. He even sold the big SUV his parents bought him and now drives a sensible, used sedan that he pays for himself. Last month, Margaret told me he passed all his final exams, the first time he'd done so without the help of a paid tutor. Apparently, he was incredibly proud. It was a small victory, but it was his. I am building a new foundation, both literally in my home and figuratively in my life. My family is no longer the center of my world. My life is now defined by my own achievements, my friendships, and the peaceful, happy home I built for myself by myself. The empty celebration that once caused me so much pain now feels like a distant memory, a necessary catalyst that forced me to see the truth. They chose to celebrate my brother's participation trophy, and in doing so, they gave me the greatest gift of all: the freedom to stop seeking their approval and to finally, truly, celebrate myself.